If you're like most people that I talk to, being the leader of a team probably wasn't your original, explicit goal that got you started. If you're like most people, what got you started was simply that there was something important that you were trying to accomplish. To accomplish that important thing, naturally, that meant collaborating and cooperating with other people. And then perhaps over time, you found yourself in a situation in which you are leading a group of people. If this kind of sounds like the path that you went on, you're not alone. The way that most of us think about how a team works follows a consistent pattern. First, it starts with an individual who has a vision. They have sort of a puzzle that they're trying to solve. They want to see this puzzle come into reality. Well, as they think about this vision, right, naturally they derive this into, well, what are the tasks that I need to accomplish in order to realize this vision? Then they try to recruit people, incentivize people in order to help accomplish this vision together. This is kind of the collective mental model that we all use when we think about what is a team. The problem is that this mental model is that it's completely broken. If you were to take a random selection of the employees in the typical team, how many employees do you think are actually engaged in the work that you're doing? 80%? 60%? 50%? It couldn't be half of people are disengaged? Well, according to Gallup, for as long as they've been measuring, the number is 30% of your team is engaged. Half of your team members are disengaged. And then you've got kind of an altering 20 to 30% of people who are actively disengaged. These are consistently the same results that we see in teams as they've been measured for decades. So what is going on here? Why are people so disengaged? Is it because this is just kind of reality? Are people inherently lazy? I don't think so. I think it's something different. What this reminds me of is the early days of human medicine. Before 1846, before we had discovered the concept of germs, do you know what people believed was the primary cause of disease? Bad smells. It was called miasma theory. And the theory is that pockets of decomposing organic matter were emitting toxic fumes, and that these fumes would travel across the countryside, and that if you were unfortunate to come in contact with these toxic fumes, these kind of bad smelling odors, that's where disease would come from. This was the prevailing and dominant mental model that everybody used to understand how disease works. And so during this time period in which people had this mental model of how disease worked, we were having a rough time of it. In particular, there was one labor and delivery ward in Austria, and on average, 5 out of every 10 women would come down with a disease they called childbed fever. 2 out of every 10 women would die in that labor and delivery ward. One man named Ignaz Semmelweis, rather than to respond to these numbers and say, well, maybe this is normal, responded by saying, this should change. And so he started an investigation. It took some time for him to really finally understand what was happening, but eventually he discovered that doctors in the hospital who were performing autopsies on dead cadavers in one wing of the hospital would then move to another wing of the hospital to deliver babies. And he theorized that maybe it would be a good idea for the doctors to wash their hands before they went from touching dead bodies to delivering women. So he implemented the very first hand washing policy. The numbers changed dramatically. From 2 out of every 10 women dying in this labor and delivery ward, the numbers changed to 2 out of every 400. That's insane. And this is all because of washing your hands. When you see numbers like this, these numbers are a sign that the mental model that you're using isn't working. If you have a mental model for how disease works, but this is the kind of amount of problems that you're having, something's wrong with the model that you're using. And so it is with the way we think about teams. We all have this common understanding of how teams work, yet we're experiencing this, which means there's something wrong with the model. And it's not just the people on your team who are suffering. Leaders suffer from this problem too. This creates a very unique form of torture for leaders. Most people are expecting to go out and work with their team and experience something that looks like this, where most people are engaged. But when what we experience in reality is something that looks more like this creates kind of this cognitive dissonance for most leaders, because a lot of the problems that we face become invisible to us. So this leads to kind of this overall effect of leaders in a house that's burning down, thinking to themselves, well, this is normal. This is fine. This is just a part of how leadership goes. That's not the case. All of these problems and more of the things you may be experiencing with your team do not need to be this way, okay? There is a solution. So what's the problem? What's wrong with our mental model that we currently have of how team works, where you have an individual with a vision who derives a set of tasks and then recruits people to help accomplish those tasks? What's wrong with this mental model? Well, one primary element that is missing from this model is that it doesn't account for the fact that humans are autonomous beings. Because of that, each and every human being has an inherent desire to understand why. Why am I doing what I'm doing? If we don't account for that reality, things go bad. And this is essentially what we're missing inside of the current mental model that we use to understand how teams work. Human beings need to know why they're doing what they're doing. Just like how learning to wash our hands was a small tweak that made a large difference in the world of modern medicine, there's a similar tweak that we can make that makes a huge difference in the engagement we experience as human beings together. And that difference is what takes place right here. Currently, the way we think about teams is that we commit people to tasks. We come up with a set of tasks, and then we find people who will commit to performing those tasks for us. This is the wrong place to establish a commitment. Instead, the place where we need to establish a commitment is at the vision level. Rather than commit somebody to doing a task, we need to commit somebody to having a shared vision for what we think the future should look like. When you establish a commitment to the vision, that commitment will cascade through to whatever tasks need to be accomplished to realize it. If you find people who share that same commitment, the tasks take care of themselves. He who has a why can bear almost any how. If you have a why, if you're committed to a vision, then you're already committed to the tasks that are required to realizing that vision. This makes a huge difference for how teams get organized. There's fundamental psychology at play inside of human beings that we are more engaged in doing the tasks when we understand the why behind what we're doing. The current mental model that we have for how teams work doesn't make this happen naturally. You should start by committing somebody to a vision and then let the tasks take care of themselves. Now, once you understand how to reorient the way you think about teams so you start adopting this framework, this opens up the door to something very exciting, which is that now, instead of operating or running a team, you start to enter the world where you can start to operate and run an autonomous team, because the people, once they are committed, can take care of the tasks themselves. Now, I know a lot of you, when you hear about this idea of an autonomous team, you might have some questions about what exactly that means. The prevailing misconception that most people have is that autonomous means out of control. If you think about an autonomous vehicle, well, yes, it is in a way out of control, right? It's out of your control, but it's able to accomplish what you need to do without your control. So the reason why most people feel hesitant and reserved about the idea of an autonomous vehicle is the same reason people feel hesitant about the idea of sticking a brick on the accelerator of your car and watching it drive down the street. That's an autonomous vehicle, but it's an unsafe autonomous vehicle. Everybody wants more autonomy. I can't imagine anybody who wouldn't want the benefits of a vehicle that could drive itself safely. And this is the same for teams. Who wouldn't want to have a team that's capable of managing and driving itself safely? So how do you do that? The way that you do this is by focusing on building autonomy ready teams. If you can build the proper attributes into a system like an autonomous vehicle, it can manage itself safely. And this is what you want to do with a team, because once you have a team that is autonomy ready, then you can give it more autonomy. Autonomy is not like a switch where you just simply flip a switch and a team is now managing itself. The reality is that an autonomous team is something that functions more like a slider. There are different stages and levels of autonomy that a team can operate in. And as a leader, you are in control of figuring out which level of autonomy is appropriate at any given situation for my team. But if I build the attributes of an autonomy-ready team, it allows me to have the ability to crank autonomy to higher levels when I need to. And this is one of the most exciting things that's taking place in our world today. More and more teams are starting to discover that we can work this way, and we want to. The benefits of learning how to run an autonomous team are enormous. Matt Black Systems is an aerospace manufacturing company from the UK, and they experienced a 500% boost in productivity as they started to grow into a more autonomous team culture. Bergzorg from the Netherlands has 10,000 nurses. This enormous organization all operates without the overhead of any managers. Favi, an automotive manufacturing company, has a 50% market share and has not delivered an order late in over 25 years. All of these organizations attribute their competitive advantage to growing an autonomous team culture. So how do you actually do that? We all want to have a team that can function more autonomously. What do you do to actually grow into a more autonomous team culture? This is what I do at the Elkadale Way. I build resources to help teams grow into higher levels of autonomy.